Well, currently the ballpark figure, the tier one is looking at around a $9 million cost to study. What we're looking at, this project, we're looking at millions of dollars to be invested. You know, when we look at a potential P3 option, for example, a P3 option would cost somewhere between $6 to $10 million just to put together a proposal for something like this. So you are looking at a major investment of money going into such a corridor. So the tier one, we'd be looking at around $9 million, and we have tier two funded at about 30 to 40, somewhere around there.
In regards to another question about who's paying for it, right?
Sorry, to answer the question, who's paying for it, it is done through the state legislation. It's 75-25, 25% in Indiana. There is a quarter of the study area is in Indiana, and it is through the annual legislation appropriations. Through our annual a multi-year program, it's through our state appropriations. So it's through state taxes. We're through federal, state and federal. It's how we get all of our road funds and all of our money for our funds.
Okay. Is there anything to add to that?
I mean, it's in general, the transportation dollars come from gas taxes that are paid to both the states and the federal government, which we get a share of that federal funding back that's paid in gas tax. So those are the types of funds that are used to pay for these kind of studies, as well as all the construction that we do eventually on roads as well.
And the next question, again about Water's Edge. Why don't they use an existing truck route like Arsenal Road instead of impacting Wilmington farmland and Water's Edge?
And those are certain routes that we did look at. We did look at Manhattan-Moni. We looked at widening Wilmington-Diatone. And what we saw there was we saw a number of residential and commercial impacts, being that there's a number, especially Manhattan-Moni Road. There is a lot of residential right off of the right-of-way or right off the road there. So we were seeing a lot of impacts, especially near the Crown Point area of 231. That there was also a lot of impacts, and we weren't seeing the travel performance numbers. The only bright spot was near the intermodals, is that when you widen near Arsenal there, you did pick up some truck traffic, but really not much. And so those alternatives with low travel performance and a lot of impacts to residents, that's why we dismissed those alternatives.
It was residential impacts and then also environmental impacts, because they were also significantly higher, because when you have to stay on that route, you don't have the ability to try to miss those, and so you wind up hitting a lot of residents and the environmental, wetlands and streams and things as well.
Yeah, so we were seeing some of the highest impacts on those material type improvements.
Arsenal Road.
And again, that's something that if there's a specific comment or question about, okay, well, can we take this corridor and does it make sense to move it a little bit more to the north? We'd like to hear those comments tonight. So please meet with somebody or make a comment saying, can you look at moving that corridor to the north? We certainly will look at that. We will look at all suggestions.
The next question is in regards to the community, Wilmington. If the people of Wilmington do not want the Illiana, will that kill B3 alternative?
Well, what we find with this corridor, we find, there is a need for this study. Right now, we do have support for this type of study. And so,
Who wants it? Let's take a vote now.
more, yeah, that's, we continue to work with what we recommend is you continue to work with your legislators, with your mayors. We continue to work with them on this type of study, and that's right.
Moving on to, after the Illiana is built, will 355 be extended so they connect?
Currently, if you looked at the spaghetti bowl of alternatives, there were a number of alternatives that spurred off of I-80. They all didn't meet the travel performance that we were looking, they weren't meeting the travel performance when you looked at the travel performance and the impacts. I-55 through New Lenox, there's a few schools there, heavy residential that has developed over time. There's really no good connection anymore. There was in the 90s a study to extend that, and since then development has taken over, and there's really no good way to extend I-325 at this point.
This is a definition question. What does a stakeholder mean?
A stakeholder is everybody. It's from your mayors and managers, township supervisors, to residents, to anybody with a vested interest in this study, in this corridor.
In regards to Midewin, what would it take to address Congress to modify the Midewin Act so as to put the protect somewhere in there? And you talked about impact to them. What does this mean?
Well, it means that there's no new highway or no new facility that can touch Midewin. That's the congressional law that's there. So it would take an act of Congress. So you would need to contract, really, your congressman to suggest a bill in Senate and go through the entire process of enacting a bill. The intermodal facility did go through a bill in Joliet through just the Army Center. It took over 4 years, I think, and that was just because it was the Army Center. It wasn't actually Midewin itself. So that was allowed by Congress, but that was an entire congressional act to be repealed. So it has happened, but for a new corridor to go through the natural area or the nature area, we think that that's a constraint.
Does that protect the original Midewin, or does that protect all the add-ons from all the parcels that are bought and given to Midewin?
That protects everything.
So anybody can buy any piece of property, give it to Midewin, and we're out. You can't ever build there, you can't do nothing, right?
Correct.
So that could happen to your corridor now, right? A rich philanthropist could go out and buy up your corridor and say, okay, I'm gonna give this to Midewin, and now you gotta move it, right?
And if that happens, then we look at a corridor that may be more impacted. We have to avoid that, so.
I don't know what's more impacting that, the highway or Midewin just encroaching on
The
the whole.
second part of the question was, I guess, for clarification here, is what do you mean about impacts? Is it more traffic in the area, or does it mean directly on it?
Impacts that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty good question.
Yeah.
The
Two-part question.
The impacts that I'm looking at is in order to avoid Midewin, we are kind of threading a thin line there to try to minimize the impacts as much as possible. And so just, when we talk about impacts, I talk about impacts in general. We talk about environmental and social, so human environment and natural environment. And so when we talk about impacts, environmental impacts, we talk about human environment, buildings, residents, and natural environment being protected areas.
So in regards to next question, actually the last question for now, unless we get some others, is in regards to foreign investors. If you were to get outside funding, would you use foreign finance or have foreign investors own and operate our highways?
That is a possibility. There's nothing in the law against that. So the law does allow just a P3 investor from anywhere for this type of facility.
The second part though, Steve, is to own and operate though.
Well,
It
it is a lease. Our current law says that we can lease this type of facility for 99 years. Indiana's 75 years. So we're 15 years. at
Yeah,
more.
the states technically will still own it. Any right-of-way would be owned by the state of Illinois, the state of Indiana, are the owners of the right-of-way. And actually, once if a private concessionaire were to come in and build the facility, the states also own that facility. And so if for some reason that they, went under, the states take back over those facilities.